So hopefully you're here because you're considering applying for product or interaction design here in NCAD, or perhaps you're just curious and have been looking at other courses, or maybe even you just want to be able to give advice to someone else. But hopefully we can give you a bit of insight into what's going on and a sense of how we encourage you to apply to show us where you're at currently, knowing full well that probably none of you are very experienced designers or have a lot of experience of product or interaction design already, and that's exactly why you want to come and study it. I'm going to cover both product and interaction design today. Both have a very similar way of looking at the world. I'll talk a little bit about the differences, but for the most part, you could treat it as the same. And indeed, I would encourage you to apply for both to keep your options open. We'll talk a little bit first about what is a portfolio, and it's a term that NCAD loves. And I don't think when I was a student many years ago, I knew what it was until I had to do and to apply for college myself. Basically, it's a collection of your design work. And indeed, I'd expand that to be your art and design or creative or technical work. It's a way of you gathering together stuff you've done to show us your ideas, your skills, and your creativity. And it demonstrates the ability to work through a process, not just one beautiful moment of artistic brilliance, but rather that you have a way of working and a way of kind of understanding things and making sense of it in order to be creative about it. And it really just demonstrates that ability to go from maybe initial research or kind of identifying a problem or something you want to fix, to observations, to ideas that you have, to giving them form and sketching them and developing them out into developed work. Because product design and interaction design have a lot of commonalities with other subjects that you might have engaged with in school, from art and design to DCG to technology and engineering to construction, a lot of the times you guys might already have an existing body of work, and some of it will be relevant, some of it won't. And I think it's deciding a little bit about what you include and what you don't include that's important. So what are we looking for really in an application or in a portfolio? Well, the official guidelines, and I would definitely encourage you all to check them out and read them. I'm sure you have, and that's why you're here. Will say that your portfolio is assessed across 3 different categories: creative inquiry and visual research. Number 2, idea development and material or technical exploration. And number 3, critical judgment, selection and resolution. And those are fairly complex terms, I suppose, in some ways, and you might be wondering what they mean. Hopefully today we can give you a sense of some of the things that you have done already, which might demonstrate those things, and other ways of working which would demonstrate those things for us, so things you can do to address that for us. There's also a set of guide words in the portfolio guidelines, and I would very much encourage you to think of these as kind of optional starting points. If you're stuck and you've got a week, maybe of evenings to try and get a portfolio together, they can be ways to get the juices flowing, to give you a starting point, maybe to give yourself a way of throwing away all the other stuff that's stopping you doing work at the moment and getting into it. Equally, you may not need them, and we're fine with that here in this department, because we recognize that what we do is different to art, and we acknowledge that there might be a different starting point for some of you guys. However, I'll talk a little bit about how some of these can be used or interpreted in a way that might kind of help you along and get started. In terms of what to include in your portfolio, we're not necessarily looking for that beautiful picture you did when you were 5 that's still on the fridge at home. We're looking for recent or current work which shows us where you're at. We'd say the last 1 to 2 or 3 years generally. Really, ideally looking for you to emphasize design project structure. So that sense of like asking questions, solving problems, exploring different opportunities. And we want to see your process. We're not just interested in the beautiful finished piece. We're interested in how you got there, because that process, that way that you think, the way that you work, that's what will come to college, and that's what will replicate when you're given different briefs and challenges. So that sense of a journey through a project. The good news is that means you don't just have to have 25 finished projects. It might be a case actually, and we'll talk about later on, that you only have 1 project, but that you're able to show the processes and the steps across 10 or 20 sheets. Particularly what we're looking for as well is that you've got an interest in interaction and product design, that you've looked them up, you've looked at designers, you've seen products, that you're excited about the things that you're surrounded, be they digital products or platforms that you use, or physical things, or even services that you've come across. Stuff which people have made to do a job for other people, which other people can use, things that excite you. And evidence of that in your research and even in your aesthetics are all really important things. It's also a really easy thing to add in, and maybe you didn't think we wanted to see it, but we definitely do want to see that you are interested in design. I'm going to go through these requirements. This presentation is being recorded and will go back up on the website. And in addition, I'm going to put up the PDF version of these slides. So you'll have access to both of them hopefully later on, but feel free to screenshot or take notes as you go. The requirements for the portfolio are an A1, A2, or A3 in a digital format. For design, I would tend to say A2 or A3 is more than enough. A1 is maybe better for large pieces of drawing or painting, which are not as relevant perhaps to interaction or product design. Looking for between 10 and 20 pages. So I'm guessing some of you may be doing a PLC or a portfolio course. We don't need everything you've ever done. So 10 or 20 of the bits that tell us a story about how you think and that show us some good outputs. Others will be going, God, I don't have 10 or 20 things. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you might work to get 10 or 20 good pages together. It's a digital submission this year, so you'll have seen pictures of old bound portfolios. But in reality, you'll be photographing your worksheets or doing them perhaps even digitally, uploading any videos that might be, maybe you want to demonstrate something that you've made, maybe you've kind of like done an experiment, maybe you've made some videos, or even websites or things like that. And so if a video is a good way to show something which moves or happens over time, definitely upload any videos and make sure that they're not password protected. And the same with any images or anything else, that we're all able to access everything. And we would say to document at least one of your notebooks, so to have a notebook, blank paper, not lined, that you're doing some exploring, some sketching, having those ideas, asking questions and showing us a little bit of how you think. An important thing to do is to organize the work sequentially. So number your pages, make sure that maybe we start with the research of a project and then move into kind of some explorations or ideas you've had where you've developed out an idea, then maybe see the final design and some testing that you've done, not to just jumble them all in and not to shake it up too much, because we're, again, looking for how you think, we're looking for that thread of things. Even if you think in a very jumbled up way, try to separate it back out and give it an align for us. Really important to label and explain each image, particularly in a digital format where it's a smaller screen that it'll be viewed on, and so that we can zoom in and get a sense of what you're talking about. And this is really one of the big things that separates a portfolio from me, is being able to kind of read and understand the questions people were asking themselves as they were doing different parts of it. Even if it was, what's the problem at the start? And as they went through it, the questions became more focused on different people's needs or on how something might do it, a mechanism or something like that. I'd also say don't discount your notebooks. They're actually really useful for us. And even though you guys have about a month left until the portfolio deadline, I would recommend getting a cheap, totally deals will have something suitable if that's available to you. A cheap notebook, which you can start to use to carry this with you and to start to build into that. For many of you who are passionate about moving into a design, or particularly maybe into NCAD, the portfolio is as important, if not more important, than your leaving cert in ways. So do give it a bit of time where you can, and where that's your level of motivation. We also want to see things in your notebooks like just related to your hobbies, your art, or your school projects, or work experience, questions that you might have had. Things that you might be hacking at home or made. Maybe you've made some bedroom shelves. Maybe it doesn't feel like it's worth including for your NCAD portfolio, but it shows us that you're prepared to make things in the world, or you've even just decorated some stuff or made some lamps or whatever. Definitely include images of key pages or video of you scanning through the notebook to give us a sense of what's going on. Yeah, Catherine, the replay of this will be posted up on the NCD site in, I suppose it'll be a day or two by the time it gets processed, but it'll be up and hopefully you'll be able to find it there. It's being recorded now. So what are we really looking for? Well, we're looking for an ability to think. That's the thing that sustains you in design, is a curious and inquisitive mind and someone who's interested in how the world works, how people works, how things shape what we do, and how we could actually give form to those different things. Perhaps you're just interested in aesthetics and beautiful objects. Perhaps you're interested in that very high luxury design. Maybe others of you are interested in things which do jobs for people, or which are cool, or which can kind of do unexpected mechanical things. Others of you might be in love with digital experiences, or really interested in working in that kind of future forward design space of digital product design. We want people who can visualize, not necessarily draw like Michelangelo, not necessarily draw like someone applying for fine art, but someone who can actually, through whatever basic means of using pencil or pen, express an idea visually, communicate it, even if it's more like a cartoon than a beautiful life drawing. Probably preferable for it to be more like a cartoon than a beautiful life drawing, most of the time, because it's quicker, it's easier to get it done. Definitely looking for people who like solving problems and who are curious and happy to kind of while the time away figuring out how things work and how they might be able to work better. And that interest in design, just to repeat it, just that you are looking around, that you know what you're getting into and that you know what you're applying for. This is a really rewarding career and profession and a really rewarding course. Our students love it. We get extremely positive feedback. They do very well because they love it. And if it's not something you love, then maybe it's not something for you. But doing a portfolio is a really good way to find out if it is something you love. So for this year, just to run through the details of the application process so that you have them and someone's going to talk to them, and feel free to ask me any questions as we go. Closing date this year for CEO is the 1st of February, so not very long. You've got a few weeks, 3 or 4 weeks to kind of make your mind up, push us up the ladder, push us up to number 1 or 2, and to get that application in for the CEO. That's followed then with a portfolio submission deadline, which will be a digital upload on the NCAD website. You'll be contacted about that, and I think your CAO number is what you use to apply. But that's portfolio submission deadline is the 11th of February. So basically you've got 4 weeks or a month. Now your lives, I'm sure, have lots of other things going on. I'm not sure if there's mock exams happening, or there might be other commitments in terms of education or work or family life, but carving out some time to get your portfolio as good as you can is well worth it for those of you that are passionate about coming here. There's some basic Leaving Cert requirements needed to attend NCAD, which is across all of the college. You need to have 6 subjects, 2 H5s and 4 O6s or H7s. You need to have Irish, English, and Leaving Cert Maths at O6 or H7 level. And you must have one of the following: a 3rd language, or an art or design communication graphics. Irish is required normally unless you have an exemption. The maths requirement can be met with some of these other subjects. So that's really important to know for some of you that might struggle with maths or not feel that you're confident of getting that particular grade. You will demonstrate the intelligence and the ability that you need to as easily in construction studies or in technical drawing or in chemistry or biology or engineering or other subjects which have that technical requirement. Amy, they're generally due around the same time every year, not exactly, but more or less around this time coming into February tends to be when they're happening, as far as I know. So those are the basics, mechanics of what you need to do and what the kind of deadlines are. But what do you want to communicate and how do you go about it? Well, really, we're looking for, going back to those kind of assessment headlines, We're looking for creative inquiry and visual research. So that sense that we can see research is not just happening in your head, you're perhaps photographing it or sketching things, observing things. You see in this image here, so an applicant who has spotted from the car a dog wearing a muzzle and just thought that seems really like cruel looking for the dog. Whether it is or it isn't, it just doesn't feel like it. Feels like it's something that could be improved. And that's really where design is all about. It's that space where I think this could be better. We're looking for that kind of initial bit of research to lead to some idea development and some material technical explorations. I'm not sure on the requirement, sorry to jump over to that question, Patricia, I'm not sure on the requirement for mature students. It will be one to give the admissions office and they will have a definite answer for you. So sorry, I can't clear that up, but I would imagine if you're coming from what we call a recognition of prior experience or prior learning, that it mightn't have the same requirements. So just to stay with that, if you've kind of identified something from research, we want to see that you're able to develop that idea out and to explore different versions of how it might be, to give visual and material form, and to actually kind of start experimenting and making things which you feel might go towards it. Nobody expects you to launch the latest Apple product perfect from where you guys are sitting now. That's what you're coming here to, hopefully to learn the skills to set you on the way to do. But what we do want to see is that using the abilities and skills you have, that your inquisitive mind is kind of pursuing these things and trying to give forms and looking at what might be rather than just what is. And the final of the kind of main selection areas is really to see that sense of critical judgment on your part, that there's a reason that you make decisions, that you're able to communicate why you think things are the right choice or the right way to go, that you're able to select the right path, and that you're able to kind of design up something which has the right level of resolution so that it comes together, it does what it's supposed to do. You've thought of all the things it's supposed to do and kind of specced out that how it might do it. These are some nice clean cartoons you're looking at in the background, but this actually is the end point of that observation of looking at a dog in a muzzle on the side of the road and thinking, that looks like it could be better. And in the end, the student was inspired by these Airbag bicycle helmets, which were developed by a couple of designers in Sweden about a decade ago, which, as you fell off your bike, inflated and covered your head, but didn't cover your head all the time. And it was particularly focused at getting young women to wear bicycle helmets more at the time, because often the fact that it would ruin hair would stop people. And these two designers, who were both young women and recognized this themselves, developed this airbag concept. The student saw that and was inspired to see how the same type of concept could act as a muzzle at the moment it was needed, but not block the dog the rest of the time. So taking that creative leap into something new. So all that big talk is great, but really what's in my portfolio? Get talking. I've only got a couple of weeks to do it. So if we look at what we describe the course line, and I'm bringing these materials up because they're things you can come back to when you're scratching your head at 10 o'clock at night and wondering what to do for your portfolio, is that for product design, product designers are problem solvers for everyday life. You identify design flaws quickly and you want to find a solution. You want things to be better. You want to help people on a practical level and make the world a better place, one design at a time. For your portfolio, it should look at existing products and situations and think how you could improve on their design. Challenge yourself to create a solution for an everyday problem. I would say that applies to product and interaction design as a really good starting point. For interaction design, it shares very similar methods to product design, but has more of a focus on digital technologies and particularly on screen-based, so designing for apps and websites as well. So much of what we do, including this, is happening through those forums. So interaction designers create intuitive and engaging digital experiences and shape the future of technology. You care about people and you want to design digital products and services with global impact. Your interaction design portfolio should show elements of problem solving, idea generation, and a curiosity for how to create technology-driven designs. What is the digital product you think people need? you'll notice it says a curiosity for how to create technology-driven designs. We don't necessarily expect anyone to be able to code or wire up things or solder electronics. It's more about understanding what these things could do and understanding how we might communicate that picture forward. And you see really that product and interaction design at that level, while one is more focused on 3D manufactured objects and one is more focused on perhaps 4D digital objects, are very much trying to create things for people, for things that people need. And that's really kind of what you should be trying to do with your portfolio, or to show some of the skills that go towards that. Now, I'm very conscious we're one of the few courses in NCAD that you don't necessarily need to do a big, long PLC art course or general art and portfolio preparation course to successfully apply for, because many of you will have relevant work already and relevant work done from school or your own lives. And indeed, you can supplement that by taking on a design challenge and doing work specifically for the portfolio. Or you can just go that route and put in a very considered piece to really make you shine and stand out. The two main routes to apply are existing work which you have, which is relevant to design and shows your skills and interests and your way of thinking. Or you can undertake a design challenge specifically for the portfolio. I'm going to talk through each of those things in sequence. I would say, just to reiterate, both product and interaction are looking for similar qualities. So I would apply for both if you think you're interested in this space. There are lots of opportunities for physical designing things in 3D, in interaction design, and vice versa. Many product designers end up designing apps and services as they follow through in their studies. So let's look at what existing work you might have that you could include and how you should do it. Art and design, the obvious one. Perhaps you did art in school or are doing art in school. Show us some of your best 2D and 3D pieces. It is, and it's really important for me to kind of get this across, it's not an art course. We're not just looking at art. We're not just looking at the kind of perhaps PHC or PLC, general art and design portfolio preparation. We're really looking to see some design and some problem solving and some applied design in the world. Another set of work that you might have, which could be really relevant, is DCG work from school, or technology, or even construction projects, which show that kind of form-giving technical understanding that maybe questions asking in development. Both of which I would definitely be including, even if I went on to do a design challenge as well, to kind of showcase my skills. Perhaps you're the kind of person who has built some furniture around the house or done some three-dimensional construction work. Maybe you've been pimping your bike or doing homemade fashion or accessories. Perhaps you're into kind of experiments. We had one person one year who had actually built a medieval catapult in their back garden. I love to see that kind of thing. So if you can show us evidence of you wanting to make things in the world, 2 or 3D, include them, and they'll put you definitely up the list in terms of that ability to kind of get going, get your hands dirty, and create things and understand how things actually work and go together. Equally, you might have been playing around with Coder Dojo as a kid and might have some bits of websites or have done some bits of electronics with my Arduinos or microbits or some hacking. You might have built some programming even with Scratch or something like that in school. Include it. We want to see that. We want to see how you're not necessarily afraid to kind of explore technology to make new things and have some fun. It doesn't have to be the most impressive work ever, and it can just be in addition to other work that you're doing for your portfolio, but it helps flesh out the picture that we get around and understand that. You may have personal projects which aren't covered by my list here, and if you feel that they're relevant and that they show some of the things I'm talking about, and be they in any of these fields or other fields, include them, tell the story, Let us know what was going on, what you were trying to achieve, how you went about it, what you learned by doing it. The types of existing works that people often have from technology or DCG will be the projects. Not necessarily interested in your exams from a few years ago, but to be able to show something that you've kind of developed and critiqued. And this format from the DCG, while it's not as sophisticated as we would use in terms of explaining design and explaining your process, is a very good starting point for understanding what you were trying to do and showing us some sketches. These ways of laying out images and text can be applied to any of you trying to show work that you have. Good quality photographs wherever you can, or if you've done CAD, fantastic, include it. And I appreciate as well, not everyone will have done these things. So don't think that if I haven't built things in 3D, I can't do product or interaction design. You most definitely can. And we're fully aware that not everyone had the opportunity for someone to introduce them to these things, or a school that perhaps offered them. So that's very much why we kind of give this wide number of options for you to find ways to express and show your kind of interest and your skills. Typical kind of artwork, including images or videos as might be, sketching, sort of type of thing now that if you are thinking of applying to these courses, that you start sketching on a daily basis, even if it's for 5 minutes in a notebook with a pencil, even if it's on the bus on the way into work or school, just to start to show that you're interested in how these things go together. And equally, personal projects or bits of code, anything that you might have touched, finding ways to communicate it. You won't necessarily have a working website, but you might have been coding and you want to take some screenshots or photographs of the screenshots and explain what you were trying to do. We're really interested to hear it. Just let the person in. So one of the biggest things is to not just drop in the piece of work and not just kind of show us that remote control car from your technology project and say nothing else. What we're really looking to see is that sense that you can tell the story of the work. So what was going on? What were you trying to do? How did you go about doing it? What was the kind of thought process you had? And where did you end up? Things like mixing in sketches with some text, which kind of can explain the different phases, some headings, which we can look at. Love to see notes and scribbles and arrows on people's sketchbooks and sketch pages, because it shows me that they're thinking of things as they draw them. Delighted to see people actually making their own stuff like t-shirts and things which you mightn't have thought were part of product design, but they show that you're just someone who doesn't want to leave the world the same way they found it. Communicating that, not being too text heavy, but balancing that visual material with some explanation is really important. And one of the things I always like to see is what you learned by doing it. Perhaps sometimes by making a little rig out of some drinking straws and pipe cleaners, you learned that this design didn't work and it fell over, and so you went back to another design that you had. That's very much the type of thing that we're hoping to see. I think important as well to present the work. So you will be photographing and uploading rather than submitting the actual sheets. That can mean that you're just laying work out neatly on a colored sheet and photographing it, and then removing the stuff and laying new things down on it, but finding a way to take the time to communicate it clearly, neatly, to show that you care about it, to show that you're aware of what neat and presentable work looks like. That can be just sometimes the difference between flicking through a notebook on camera or taking a few blurry shots at 11 o'clock at night on a medium quality phone camera, or it can be going and setting up a table in daylight near a window and trying to photograph things as best as you can, as steady as you can, and kind of really letting the work shine. Equally, many of you are probably familiar with some digital software that you could use for presentation, from the likes of Photoshop or InDesign. Canva is really accessible and a really easy way to kind of put images and text together, or PowerPoint even. There's nothing wrong with doing it analog on paper, but equally, there's nothing wrong with doing it in a digital format. Just keep the template really simple. Don't have lots of kind of colored bands and things moving across the images. Let your work be the most interesting thing on the page. And just to go back to those criteria, because again, it's always helpful to have that guide in your head when you're wondering what to do next, but to show us that sense of creative inquiry, how you explored the idea. Maybe in your DCG, actually, in the final submission, you didn't have all the elements which showed all the way you were thinking, or the sketches that you did. Perhaps now is where you include them, and we maybe care more about them than the DCG examiner. The idea development, what you were trying to do, and the different layers of sketching, or the different kind of iterations you went through, from maybe really early trying to give things form in clay and moving it up into something more constructed and sharper and more accurate. Take images and let us see as you go and where you're going. And again, that judgment, that way you think, why I did this instead of that, why from making this I learned this, and so I realized that. Or when I showed my idea to someone, they actually thought it would be really good if it did this, and so I've actually incorporated that feature into my last design, my last sketch of it. So that sense of, we don't want you to try and fool us and tell us it's perfect. We want to let us know how you've brought through it. So how big should a good standard portfolio be? So the guideline, Moya, was 10 to 20 pages or sheets or images, digital sheets. It depends a little bit. If you're cobbling together the stuff you have already, I would say you kind of want to be aiming for about 10 sheets to try and tell that story that of some of the work, expanding on some of it, or maybe kind of showing it nicer. Some people will have loads and loads of projects that they conclude. Some people will, and I'd say I was the exact same in my day, sitting down in a panic to try and do a portfolio to get into this course. And I did my portfolio on, let's say, in a week on the Easter holidays. The timeline was different back then, but it is doable to get something out in a few days. If you can clear a few weekends for it, you'll find that you can actually start to produce a number of sheets a weekend, and you will get to that 10 to 20 pages. It is a vague answer, though, I know, Moya, because 10 good pages is definitely better than 20 bad pages. However, work with the time you have. And I would definitely say to any of you, don't not apply because you don't think what you have in the end is enough. Let it in, send us in. You never know. We might see something in it. We might see something that we like in how you think. Should a portfolio just have the final product, or should it also include the thought process? It should very much include the thought process, Amy. That process of kind of what was the starting question that you were asking? What were you trying to achieve or solve? How did you go about exploring what that was? And as you kind of move through the phases then of figuring out what it might look like, or what the mechanism might be, or whatever. So if you like, if I had one good project, the minimum a good project would be like 2 of those 10 sheets. And indeed, it might well be 4 or 5 or even 10, if we, especially as I talk later on about the design challenge approach. So definitely there's good value to be had in letting us know your thinking along the way. Especially as a designer, it's always a risk that someone doesn't necessarily like your final design. But if they saw how you arrived at it, they might understand that it was the right design and the right one. So definitely include that stuff. So from common entry, obviously common entry is a more general type of portfolio. Typically what people do when they're applying for product or interaction as well is do some more or include some more design related work in addition to perhaps a standalone common entry portfolio. Many of the portfolios for common entry are kind of definitely a good 6 months work that people have put in. Not necessarily, some people have done it in school in the evenings, other people have done a PLC for it. There's lots of kind of drawing and exploded peppers and things like that. that general art stuff doesn't tell us too much as to whether or not you're interested in things and the technical end of design and how things work. So I would definitely encourage you to include work that's for design as well as the common entry portfolio. And so typically people will have their big A1 common entry portfolio, and they will have taken a design challenge if they don't have additional material, or if you indeed have DCG and other things in our school, you can include those as well. And we can see that there's this artistic side as well as this technical side. But doing what we call taking a design challenge is a really good way to address your worries if you're not sure, or if you feel that your work is mainly visual art stuff. Does that answer the question, Katie? It's obviously a bit difficult to know where any of you guys are coming from exactly, but hopefully we can give you a sense of it. So any more questions on applying with existing work and what you might do? Is anyone sitting on a DCG project and unsure if they or unsure after me explaining it perhaps what they should be doing or if they should include it? Feel free to shout out as well, obviously, if you don't fancy typing. Okay, well, there'll be more time at the end, so you might have time to frame your questions in the meantime. So the next thing I'm going to speak about is that other option where you do a portfolio just for us, or make us feel special. Sculpture projects would definitely be relevant, and we'll be looking again to see your process throughout that. You can include those obviously in just 2D visuals, but if it's the type of thing where a video is useful, or maybe, and I think if it is a 3D thing, even sometimes having a short video of moving around it. Definitely always interested to see construction and making in that space. Again, if that's all you have is sculpture and art, including some of the more design-oriented stuff, even if it's just some sketches, some smaller bits that you've done, help us see that side of you. And this is the thing. Your art teachers or your family or your friends, they know you for the full complex and creative person that you are. We only get to judge you off what's in the portfolio submission. So if there's things that you do or like or can do, but you haven't included, we won't know about them unless they're there. Yeah, building design, architecture, stuff like that are really useful. Even actual building, if you've gone and built a pizza oven or a hut or a tree house, it just, again, allows us to see that ability to go from a design in your head to a visualization on paper or in a computer to a three-dimensional representation. And that journey from question or idea to exploring it and giving it form and sketching to building it is really what product and interaction design are very much about. So the other route where you're maybe sitting going, I don't know if I have anything that's relevant, but I really want to do this course still, it sounds interesting, is to take a design challenge. A design challenge like this could be something that you work on full-time for a month, or it could be something that actually you're able to give one weekend to, because that's all the time you have. Just before I go into talking about design challenge, I'll answer Olivia's question. For product design, you can include furnitures. Yes, you can, definitely. Chairs, perfect, love to see that. For fashion, do you mean for us or for applying for fashion? Olivia. So I would, for applying for fashion, I would assume they do for, I can't speak to it because I'm not 100% what they're sure, but I would definitely guess they are looking to see your own interest in this, in fashion and in that area, and an awareness of it, and an awareness of kind of contemporary fashion. Definitely that you're doing your own things, and quite a lot of people I would see from portfolios I've reviewed which have fashion oriented stuff have made garments, from fancy ball gowns up to waist couture, up to small accessories or t-shirts. I think they would definitely want to see that. Anyone that you're applying for will be interested in stuff in their area, as well as some of that kind of higher level the way you think stuff. So if you want to put a portfolio together for product design and you don't feel you have enough or very much of the existing work, we highly recommend taking a design challenge. And that's what I'll go through for the rest of the session. Mainly is how you might go about that. I'm sitting down, I've got some paper, I want to put a portfolio in, now what? And that's quite a daunting place to be in. And you might just actually do some designs, you might actually kind of have ideas and go at it. But if you don't, taking on a kind of full process and going from that research to ideation, to giving form to prototypes with stuff like materials you have access to testing it with people, that's a really strong submission for us. And it shows someone is really interested, cares, and it allows us to see their kind of ability to think, visually communicate, explore different forms, explore different interactions, and test it with people. So taking a specific design challenge allows you to engage with the design process. I think there's two really useful sides to this. One is for us, it lets us see how your brain works across that design process. It gives you a structure as well to follow, which is really important. And I think one of the other big things that it does is if you don't enjoy doing your portfolio, then you're unlikely to necessarily enjoy the field. I guess if you're here, you're interested in the creative arts, you might have come and you're more interested in illustration or graphic, but actually a lot of the time those people fall in love with product design and vice versa. So those creative fields will probably carry you through. But following a process allows you to kind of make sure that it's for you, and it gives us a sense of what's interesting, what you're doing. It gives you a structure to allow you to build a portfolio from scratch. And I think this is really important. We don't want to be part of the maybe fine art or common entry approach where people spend a whole year doing their portfolio. I don't think people have the time to spare it. I think it can be a bit of a luxury in comparison to what you might be able to do in a shorter period of time, which will show us the abilities and interests you have. So when you're doing a design challenge, it can take as much or as little time as you have. And that's so important to remember. It's definitely worth putting one weekend of work into something if that's all you've got. If you've got 4 weekends and a number of evenings between now and submission, then do that and build it out and give it form. But people have gotten in on portfolios that they've done in a weekend because we can just see that they understand the key bits. The easiest way to do a design challenge project or to engage with the project is to find a problem that people experience, a situation that you think could be made better through design. This could be something you experience every day, like waiting for a bus and wondering why there's no app that can tell you where the bus actually is. Or it could be something that you've heard of or seen, or it could even be a big problem to do with sustainability or overfishing or anything like that. But basically, it's a situation that you think can be made better through design, through creating something new, be it a physical thing or a digital thing or a smart product or a service or anything. And we want you to create a new design which solves that problem. So first thing you need to do is find a problem, and then the next thing you need to do is engage in a process which expands out different possibilities, different solutions, gives form to different ways of looking at it and solving it, and identifies the best solution that you can come up with in the time. So we very much start off with creative inquiry and visual research, that first kind of assessment criteria for the portfolio. What does that mean in a design challenge? Well, it starts off with maybe understanding who you're designing for. Perhaps your granny was quite isolated during COVID and you really kind of felt that there should be something which you can make which would allow you to get a bit closer because Zoom wasn't working or the phone felt too rubbish. So understand that person, find that person. It doesn't even have to be a person, as I showed you. It can be a dog on the side of the road. And the best way to do that is to interview people, to talk to them about things that they might have found difficult, to talk with them in the environment, maybe where you think things are happening, to observe them, to see what's actually happening. Maybe how people try to listen to music while cycling through the city, or what could design do to make that better. Bear in mind that pretty much everything is designed. In that picture, the bikes are designed, the Dublin Bikes infrastructure is designed, the fact that there's a card and a website is designed, the passenger on the bike and headphones and phone software is all designed, so you can change things by getting in there to do it. Actually trying stuff out and body storming it yourself is a really good way to get the experience of what it is and what you're doing, that what it is and what the problems or difficulties might be with that. If anyone has actually ever used a Dublin bike, getting it back into the stand is always a little problem. Maybe you identify an area that you want to tackle. Maybe it is about kind of giving your nana a better way to communicate in lockdown, and you start to do some secondary research. And secondary research means going and reading stuff online, reading the newspaper, going to the library, looking things up related to it. What are the products that are out there currently? What are some of the technical requirements around it? And maybe where can you find inspiration from other things? And this is that example of the airbag bicycle helmet, which this student used to translate instead of a dog having to wear a muzzle all the time. It was something which popped out and protected, stopped them being able to bite or damage anyone. So taking that secondary research and getting stuck into the space and reading about the subject and finding out what's going on, as well as trying it out, or if it's maybe you're looking at sea plastic and it's going down to the shore and digging things up, that's very useful, but it's also really useful to understand the data and the research around something like this. You might be struggling to kind of get going and find a spot, and you can look back to these guide words. I've underlined some which are kind of particularly obviously linked to maybe design in terms of remaking things and doing it in a different way, or future codes and different future ways we might interact or behave through technology. Everything that we do is shaped by design, so everything from dating to cooking is always increasingly influenced by design and technology. And so you can look at these different ways of going it. Disrupting things is a classic thing to do with tech, that we change entirely how things have happened up until now. Reimagining, empathy, remake. So it's easy to see maybe how you can kind of take some of these guide works and use them to it. Other ones will be more specific, but they might inspire you. So perhaps you look at mimic, and maybe you're looking at nature and wondering how we could mimic nature to create really low impact products and services which have these beautiful, elegant, natural principles in them. One thing I would say to get started with is to start with maybe the guide words, or to start with a particular subject that you have in mind, and to brainstorm and mind map. And I would do this on a large sheet, a sheet that's the same size as your submission, A3 or A2, and actually do it as a rich visual mind map where you're really letting us into kind of the things that are in your brain. Looking at what problems you might see, what opportunities you might see, looking at that kind of associative way of thinking. If you're unsure what a mind map or a brainstorm is, look them up. And that's another thing we're really looking for, is people who can actually take initiative and look stuff up. Don't think you need to just show us answers, ask questions and make it obvious that there's things that you don't understand that you think might be interested. That's a really good mind map. Gets the viewer into the same head place as yourself. And if you've explored your research, try to set yourself a challenge. How might I create something which would help my granny communicate or feel closer to her family when lockdowns are on? Don't necessarily design that, because we'll all have the same thing. When you've kind of got a design challenge, make yourself a research plan. So who should you be talking to? Start at home with whoever's around, start with your friends, maybe some teachers could be useful to talk to. Consider what you should observe and where you should go. We take that example of trying to create something for your granny, and you should be maybe looking around the house and speaking to her and asking her what she's comfortable with and what feels meaningful to her and when does she happy. Can you experience that problem firsthand? Can you be the person who's having to shout through someone through a closed window? or for whatever your problem is. What online research can you do to read about these things and find out? And are there even related products and solutions out there that you can look at? Don't be disheartened if you find something that you think is doing what you thought you might be creating yourself. Have a good critique of it. See how it could be better. See what it's not doing. Perhaps it's just too expensive. Perhaps it's not sustainable. There are loads of ways that you can add value and create something new. And definitely looking for inspiration. Looking at the likes of design online on YouTube, or even design magazines like Fast Co-Design or Design can all help you see different kind of contemporary design work. One of the big things to do is document this research. So if you're looking up things online, include those kind of key things that you found on a board. Tell us about the research that you found out that was important. Take pictures, or when you're make notes when you're interviewing people. Perhaps you're going to be doing this on the bus on the way in the morning. Maybe you've got a long bus for an hour and you get it with some friends every day. Use them, pester them. You can get half your portfolio done and half your project done on your way to school every day by finding stuff out, testing ideas, and documenting it. Your phones, assuming you have a phone or a camera, is your best friend here for helping you record clips, make notes, take pictures of when you're doing these interviews, when people are looking at your stuff. Showing that research is so important. We don't want it to just stay in your head because we don't have access to your head for the day. So finding a way to tell the story, and this kind of annotation or writing and explaining things, drawing on top of images, all really, really useful to show us what's going on. Continuing research throughout the project really helps. It allows you to kind of keep growing your learning and understanding. So it's not just something that you might do before you've started to have an idea. It's something that you do while you have an idea to test that it's going in the right space or that someone else hasn't done it already. And again, going back to some guide words which might help prompt you in different directions and give you new angles to look at. We went back to that list. One of the words on it is empathy. Empathy is like the cornerstone of human-centered design, which is very much what designing for people is. It's about understanding other people's situations. If you took that word alone, you could very much apply it to a dog muzzle scenario of actually empathizing for not just the dog who has to wear a muzzle all the time when they're out and about and they want to be sniffing things and getting their heads in under bushes, but also maybe the children that see a dog wearing a muzzle and think it's scary, or the mum that grabs the child's arm when a dog in a muzzle goes past. So getting into the mindset of someone else can really allow you to understand what might be going on and to create something new which maybe doesn't have that same problem. So that's kind of how you might find a problem and learn about it. So something that you might start to kind of get a sense that you could improve or address. And then really you need to have these ideas and develop the ideas out and kind of give them form through material or technical exploration. So moving from that idea, I think it could be this, into giving it form and sketching it, and maybe even making some kind of rough prototypes out of card or chicken wire or pipe cleaners, anything which will give it form. You might be happy using clay or Play-Doh, anything which we can kind of see. They've given it form, they've tried it out. There's their granny trying to use this shape or tool. And that's how we create ideas beyond the known or purely observed. So things that you didn't just copy this. It's by kind of exploring and moving through it that you create new ways of doing the job. It's really about being playful and imaginative. And this is maybe where hopefully you love design and you love drawing and you love thinking about these things and can give yourself some time as an antidote perhaps to study or work or other things that you have to do. We want to see how you can kind of take what you learned from the research and produce new creative outcomes for it. So give form to new ways of looking at it. Now, it's not easy to just go, be creative. We recognize that, and it's a little bit about giving yourself the time and the kind of structure for working to do that. But an innovative idea is awfully a connection between or an expansion of existing ideas. So this notion of maybe remixing rather than creating from scratch. Maybe you've kind of got something in mind, but it needs to do something more, or it needs to stop being a problem. But perhaps you've seen other things in the world, or through research you find them, and they're things which, if you could apply it to this situation, it would solve the problem. So you're probably all familiar with Dyson and even James Dyson. Many of you might even be familiar with the development of the Dyson Hoover, which apparently took thousands of prototypes and about 15 years to get right. But he was very much frustrated. The problem he had was that the Hoover with the paper bag as a filter gets blocked after about 2 minutes of using and gets very inefficient. And he was inspired by these industrial cyclones, which didn't use a bag and just used centrifugal force. By combining the two things which hadn't been combined before, he created a multi-billion-dollar company in a product category. So that sense of looking outside of the area you're looking at to find a problem, a solution, can be really valuable. Much like the dog muzzle being inspired by a bike helmet, seeing a technology and seeing an opportunity. Even like this tea maker here, which is inspired by the notion of actually putting on a fleece and staying warm and combining a glass decanter with an overcoat to allow you to have kind of a beautiful, clear liquid that you can see, but also something which keeps warm while you're using it. So that combination of different ideas. Those kind of connections are usually made in the subconscious part of our brain. So the back of your head is where the really clever shaking two things you never thought about putting together before comes from. But really, you can often say that they happen when you're relaxed, following a period of intense immersion. You've been trying and thinking and researching, you're trying to do your portfolio. You'd hoped you'd get it all finished in one weekend, but you haven't really got ideas yet. When you're going to bed that night, ideas will pop into your head most likely. Or if you're having a bath, they sometimes say bus, bath, or bicycle, or bed, or where ideas pop into your head. And it's when you're not trying to be creative that they can sometimes surface. So have your notebook handy. Keep your notebook in your bag. If you're using your phone, have a way to get stuff off your phone. If you're sketching on an app on your phone, make sure that you can get it out and get it into your presentation. Get that sense of familiarizing yourself with the problem and your research finding, and then ideas will come. They'll probably come in things like maths class or French, and be able to kind of capture them and note them, because ideas don't hang around. You need to get them down. So what can you do? Well, you can go back to make this happen is to process your research again sometimes if you're stuck, and you'll see something new. You'll see something you missed the first time that someone said to you, and it might spur another way of going into sketching and giving it ideas. But really sketching and exploring and giving forms. In terms of sketching, don't use blue biro and don't use lined paper like a copybook paper. Generally recommend getting plain paper, getting an A3 pad. Doesn't have to be expensive paper, expensive markers, and a black pen or a black marker or a blue coloring pencil or a black pencil will allow you to kind of get a nice clean line on a page, communicate your idea, and to kind of move quickly and rapidly through the ideas. So this one project you have maybe around making your nan feel more connected in COVID can turn into 10 sheets very quickly over a couple of days. When you're sketching, it's initially all about quantity. Don't worry if they don't look good. Don't spend 3 days on one beautiful tiny sketch in the corner of the page. Just try and move through it. Don't overwork them. Don't be too critical of your ideas at that stage, because they're definitely not right, but they're early ideas and they'll get better. And don't spend too much time on any one idea. It's better for us to see a number of different ideas done quickly than to think that someone just has one idea and that maybe that idea never developed. If it's an app or a piece of software, be creative about how you might actually explore what that might be. Don't just say the app will do this actually try to draw out the screen to give it form. If you've got digital skills like Photoshop or something, fantastic, but this is actually better to do it with pen and ink and to actually explore what it might be and how it might work and if it makes sense to people. Get your friends around. Maybe there's other people you trust. Maybe there's people in your network that you can access that are in different spaces, or maybe your family members or friends who know about stuff, and you can go and talk to them and run your ideas by them and get new input. Document that you did that, document what the ideas were. We want to see it. Brainwriting is one method where you can actually just try to expand the different ideas you have. So you might just start off with 1 or 2 or 3 ideas on a post-it note or on a piece of paper and try to pull or 2 out of each, two new ideas out of each one, and just set it out as a challenge to do it. So something that could be a nice sheet as well to submit, including. And really, as we move forward in the design process and you start to have a sense of what the thing is that you're trying to design, it's about communicating your critical judgment and your selection and resolution. So identifying which ideas have the most potential, taking at least one of them and developing it thoroughly to a level of completion. And again, as much or as little time as you have. If this is a 1 weekend sprint, you'll be doing this on Sunday afternoon or Sunday lunchtime and trying to build a quick model and photograph it. If you have more time, you can give more time to the building of a model or something like that. Show how your creative outcomes and solutions have evolved as part of this research process. So the idea you started with most likely won't be the same, exact same as what you finish with, because you'll have learned along the way. You'll have had better ideas, new ideas. People will have corrected it for you. It's very much about identifying the problem, developing it, and presenting that the final image. So which ideas show the most promise? Look back over all your ideas and rate them. Ask others for feedback. Select one for development. And development means taking it maybe from an initial sketch or something into more pages of sketches to figure out how it all goes together, or how it should look, or what the size of it should be, or the material should be. It doesn't have to just be a product, and this applies to product and interaction design. It might be a physical product. It might be an app or a website. It might be a service, a way of doing things. A service could be someone who drops fresh food to your house rather than letting you doing a big shop every week and it going off in the back of the fridge. It could be a space or an environment that you've created, which maybe is like the school that you'd like to be in. It can be a combination of any of the things above. So really, we don't want to limit what the solution looks like or the design looks like. Think broadly, think in the best way to kind of achieve what you're trying to achieve. I want to create a school environment where everyone can be creative and where bullying doesn't happen. That's a nice challenge. What might that look like? What would that school look like? You want to develop your ideas, so to give it form. So why am I in the National College of Art and Design showing you a picture of a large cardboard box on the side of the road when I talk about developing something? There's someone in that cardboard box and they're pretending to be a smart vending machine for different medications and bandages and things that tourists might need when they're visiting a city but mightn't know where to get. This is the design idea, but this was something that was done in half an hour to get out onto the road to find out what people actually wanted, because they see this big thing and they come up and they ask what it's about and they touch it, and then you get to talk to them and then you get to find out really. So by giving it form, by trying to kind of low risk, low investment, explore what that might be and developing it out, you learn more and you'll develop it even further again. Thinking about how it might work, what technologies involved, what materials are involved. And then really developing that idea out in different ways. Draw the idea from different views, so from the front, from the side, from an angle if you're feeling up to it. Gather different material samples which you feel might be useful. Show us them, and you'll see here the student has actually stuck on different materials onto the page. Make sketch models. So a sketch model is a really quick model that you might make out of some cardboard and sellotape, some wire, something you could bend up in an hour, which actually gives form to your idea. Don't want you to go off and spend 4 weeks making a full-size chair. I'd much rather you made some small-scale models of chairs to explore how they might go. And can test your ideas in the real world. So if it's something that you can actually try it out. If it's something that you can go around to your Nana's house and attach to the window and speak to her, or put a walkie-talkie on or whatever, try it out. Tell us what you learned, see what went well. Keep it simple, keep it quick. That's the main thing we'd say. When you're presenting all that back, remember to kind of tell us the story of how your idea evolved during the project. Remember to ensure that you communicate how the design solves the challenge. Show us it in action. Maybe that's a storyboard cartoon of different things happening and people using it. Maybe it's actual photographs of your prototype being used. What does it look like? What size is it? What materials are made out of if it's a physical thing? What does it look like if it's on a phone or on a website? How does it work? So where you can try to figure out, the phone sends a signal to the device, then the device switches on. Sketch it out. We'll figure it out. What's the user experience like? How do you want it to be to engage with? So make sure you kind of are clear as to what the design challenge was and how your design is going to improve that situation, what it does to make it better. It won't necessarily solve all the problems you set out to, but what your final solution might solve some of the problems that you've tried to do. And make sure you can tell us who you're going to help with this. And then presenting the evolution of an idea. How did you arrive at your solution? So this is a sense that one design challenge can give you up to 10 sheets for your submission. It can be your entire portfolio submission if that's all you've got. But each of those sheets can bring us through the initial research, the question, what you found out, how you developed ideas, how you kind of sketched and gave them form, how you tried things out with people and tested them, how you made a prototype, and how that kind of told a story of what it does. Be creative. We're really open to you finding different ways of exploring it. Your models could be made out of anything you have access to. We don't expect fancy design stuff. You're coming to college to learn that stuff. Test it with anyone that will help it. So perhaps you can't access your NAM because of COVID, but maybe you can enact it with your friend or your sister to try and get a picture of what it would be like for two people to use this thing. And don't be afraid to kind of take photos of any models, even if you think they're crude, particularly people using them. Show us the final details of the final design and the shape, and ideally drawings to show scale, space, and layout. So that sense that you're able to not just make a cup, but perhaps detail out that it's the right size, communicate that in 2D, which is the designer's job. Digging into the details. What's it made of? Are there controls or mechanisms? How might they work? Drawing models, physical computing, great. If you don't understand electronics, but you know there will be electronics, it's fine to just sketch some stuff in and say, likely to have connectors. Don't not do it just because you don't understand it perfectly. Some things will be sensible, other things will be less so. Other technologies you totally know you need, and you're going to really enjoy describing them or detailing them, adding a little bit of color, etc. If it's a user experience, show us who's going to use your idea. How will someone interact with it? Is it something that is a smart mirror that as they walk past, it will come to life? Do they touch a button? Can you show us this? Can you take photos of someone doing that? How will they pick up or operate it? Will they engage with the space? What information will they see? Show us these things and figure out ways to do it. Sometimes you take a photograph and you Photoshop in or actually draw on the information you want to see on screen. Other times you actually just draw the screens like you can see in the background here. You have models. Could your idea benefit from user feedback? So perhaps you're taking some work you have, but you want to flesh it out a bit more. Could you take that piece that you have or that model? Would it benefit from some user feedback? What might a future iteration of the idea be? Are there features that you didn't actually communicate well that you could in this, and do supplementary sheets, say, from your own DCG projects or other projects that you've done? And have you shown your design process? Could that be another sheet or something that would be relevant to us? You're working on a new design challenge. Identify what's good or bad in the space. Build a model to test your idea. Use the materials to hand. Get feedback from someone in the house. And make it really quickly, simply, and effective. Get through the process. Be brave, be curious, be bold. When I say that a design challenge can be done in a weekend, it can actually be done in a day, and it can also be done in 12 weeks of non-stop work, or 12 years indeed in some cases if you're James Dyson. Don't let how much time you have stop you. How much time you have will just dictate how much time you're able to spend on it. But I would say that you can definitely show us something in whatever time you have. And so to embrace that and to put something in, even if it's in addition to your existing work or even your common entry application. As I do say, I would really recommend applying for both product and interaction. It gives you an option, something that even if you got one that you didn't want, it gives you an option and a chance to think about it and maybe to talk to one of us about what that might mean for you. That's me. I've talked a lot at you, and I guess you're tired after that too.